we welcome on the multi-time and multi-FPS world champion 2020 CDL regular season MVP and player for the Dallas Empire Shotzzy. Listen, man, I know we've got a lot to cover. There's a lot of things that have happened, especially in a very short time post-CDL champs. But before we do that, I have to ask you, how does it feel to have all of these accolades now attached to your name?
Yeah, it feels crazy, teaming with Crim and Clay, once I got the opportunity back in, the end of Black Ops 4, it was, I took it instantly, I'm able to team with, considered the greatest of all time with that. And, being able to team with Kyler and Inder, which is, my best friends when it comes down to COD. It's crazy thinking about it, but yeah, I'm glad I was able to team with them.
Now, I know kind of coming into the season, whenever a number of different teams were kind of announcing their players, Dallas Empire included. We saw, unique videos for each individual player, yourself included. But in that video, you kind of had a primary quote associated with it, which was pretty much this idea that you wanted to prove that you were worth the investment. And I know there were a few rumors kind of throughout the regular season. I think it was Hastro that kind of came out and said, hey, listen, this is one of the most, rather we kind of paid a very heavy price for someone like Shotzzy to be on this team. Kind of all those things associated with one another. Given all the things that you accomplished throughout this season, again, we talk about the World Championship, we talk about the MVP of the regular season, and doing that in such a short time period, do you feel like you've done what you set out to accomplish?
Yeah, I'd say so. I didn't expect to win, multiple championships with this team. I knew that we were something special, but I didn't think we were going to win, 3 events on top of that, like a world championship. So,
right.
It's crazy to think about, but yeah, I'd say I'd fulfilled Envy's request, as you can say.
There you go. That's a good way to put it. Like the requests, the nice little requests.
Yeah,
I think it's fair.
Out, yeah.
Now, one of the most impressive things about this season is not only that you were the MVP. It's not only that it was a world championship victory. But it was also that you did it in such a short period of time, right? We talked about the quick transfer from someone like Halo to COD. And in fact, like I said, it is your rookie season, all those things kind of inclusive to each other. What do you cater that quick rate of success to the most?
I'd say my quick success just comes to Crim and Clay. Literally just teaming with veterans honestly helped me tremendously. I mean, on top of that was our coach. He made me understand the game that I didn't really, understand that much. And, he helped me, the biggest thing that he helped me was just playing my life. I didn't really do that when it came down to team scrims, stuff like that. So he implemented that. And then, Clay and Crim helped me with my communication. I didn't really small talk because, in Halo, it was just all talent. I could just do whatever on the map. And, it's crazy to see that, the success or the improvements ever since the beginning.
I gotta say, it is interesting because a lot of people like to associate the Empire as hey, you got 2 veterans and you got 3 young guys. I think who can kind of be brought in that conversation of someone who's been around for a very long time. Talk about Coach Rambo, who's been around since literally the beginning stages, and same thing can be said for Hastro. You're kind of surrounded by not just players on the team, but also management, coaches, and stuff like that, kind of who have been around the block for such a long period of time. I will say, being coached by someone like Rambo, who's considered kind of the grandfather of Call of Duty esports. Was there a moment whenever you're learning something from Rambo that you were just wow, that is something that I had never thought of before? Were there any things that Rambo introduced to the team that kind of shocked you as a player?
Yeah, he brought a lot to the table. There were just some things that I didn't really understand in Call of Duty that he helped me understand. The biggest one to me that comes to mind was just valuing your life. I didn't understand how big of a thing that was, and just as they say, be slippery on the map.
Yeah.
That's a big thing. Because if you're able to play your life and allow your teammates to get there and then just trade out the kill, it's so much in Call of Duty. So he's been a lot. He brings a lot to the team.
Now, I have to say, too, there obviously is a major spark around the team in terms of, we talk about the young guns, yourself and Illy, the rookies brought into the team. We talk about the veterans, considering, kind of Clayster and Crim6's history. But there's one player who I feel gets left out a lot of the time. That's Hook, right? Somebody who's been around the scene for such a long period of time. Obviously, transferred from Halo to COD like yourself. Obviously, started off in COD, first off. But I will say, from at least my perspective, I feel he has the right to be considered one of, if not the most underrated player throughout all of the Modern Warfare season, as someone who kind of built the roster. I think Hastro said he gave him the keys. He let him kind of make the play, and his first decision was to go with yourself, and it was to go with Illy. What is it like been teaming with someone like Hook, kind of given the similar history that you guys have, and the way that he kind of works throughout this team's landscape?
Yeah, I'd definitely say Hugh is the most underrated player in the CDL. I was able to team with him this year, so just seeing how unselfish he is, and just seeing that like he will do whatever the team needs to win. Like he literally took a different role that he didn't want to, but like he did it just for the team. Like stuff like that you never really get. When it comes down to like a team. So I'd say Hugh is the most underrated player. And yeah.
I gotta say, in terms of someone like Hook, he's kind of, at least when it comes down to the media side of things, you don't really hear him talk a whole lot. What is it like teaming with somebody like? Is he actually more of a vocal guy? Does he talk to you and Illy often? Like, how exactly does that kind of function?
Yeah, Hugh doesn't really talk on social media, but like he's something funny. Like I wish he like streamed because he's really funny when it comes to like joking around. Like he's so funny.
Now I gotta say too, when we talk about this year for you and what it kind of meant, did you expect to win the MVP award?
No, I did not expect to win the MVP award. Just because like the first two events were kind of like a dagger to me, just because there were just really bad events for me personally, and when it comes down to the other four MVP candidates, they were consistent throughout the year. So yeah, I didn't think I was gonna win, but I knew that there was a possibility.
Now, Krim recently in an interview said that you guys were roasted worse than any other team that he's ever seen in Call of Duty history to start the year, which is, I wouldn't say high praise, but it's definitely something that's interesting at the least, considering Crim6's history, how long that he's been playing for. He's seen literally every single iteration of top caliber teams, and obviously teams that have been roasted, if you will. And I feel like it's fair to say a lot of teams in that moment would crumble, right? You have the expectations of being a rookie. You come from Halo to Call of Duty. You're a world champion in Halo. The questions are now, brought upon, hey, can he do it in COD? Can he have a quick transfer? The rumors get brought up in terms of like, hey, can he be another formal? I mean, all of these little things that kind of get tossed around. Like a lot of teams in that moment, especially for yourself and Illy, would crumble. Why didn't the Empire? Why didn't you guys?
We just came in as a team right after the event and literally just talked about like, for some reason, Krim and Clay were like happy that we lost. Like they were just happy. I have no idea why. They just saw like improvements within us. So like that right there gave me confidence that they still believe in me. So right after that event, I think we went into LA. We ended up winning that event, and then from there on out, like we were just dominating.
Now, Krim also later on in an interview talked about this team in particular, like this Dallas Empire is the greatest team that he has ever played for. And for those that obviously know Call of Duty history, for those that have watched Crim6 play throughout his entire career, he's basically played for three teams, right? He's played for the Complexity/EG team, played for Optic, and now plays for the Dallas Empire. Those other two teams, right, in terms of Complexity/EG and Optic, dynasties. So to say that the Dallas Empire is the greatest team that he's played for, considering that he's played for the two best teams in Call of Duty esports history, what does that say about this team, you think? What was your reaction to his comments about this team and what this roster means in comparison to the other ones he's played for?
Yeah, he described it to us. He basically just said that, he's been on dynasty teams, and he just says that, they're really talented, but like he's never experienced, a team like this where like we could do whatever it takes to win, as in like, when it comes down to, changing a role or like, dying for your teammates, stuff like that. Like he's never experienced like a team like that. So once he said that, it's special just because, I've seen him growing up playing, with the Optic Dynasty and just see how dominant they were. So for him to say that with me, Illy, and Kyler, it means a lot to us.
Now, I know this conversation gets brought up a lot in sports as well. It's like this idea of, guys who are now in the NBA get to say, hey, I grew up, watching LeBron James play. Now I'm playing against him on the court. Or guys talk about like Tom Brady. There's been a number of different defensive linemen who have talked about, oh my gosh, I get to play alongside Tom Brady or play against him, all those things because you grew up watching him. And I feel like in esports specifically, this is kind of more common because of how quickly the transfer is. We talked about a number of different esports. I mean, you have the ability to play at like 14, 15 years old. Obviously, with Call of Duty having the 18-year-old restriction is a little bit different, but still, I know coming from a Halo background, did you ever watch somebody in COD kind of growing up and think, wow, I want to be like that guy? Or did you aspire to watch any team in particular kind of more often as you grew up and kind of got more into esports?
Yeah, so growing up, when it comes down to Call of Duty, it wasn't necessarily like a person. It was just like a team. For example, like the Optic Dynasty, when they had their run in like, I think AW, when they were winning every single event, like, as a competitor, you want to win every single thing you can. So that, motivated me, and, I wanted to become that one day.
Now, when I had the chance to talk to Clayster, he kind of told me this season for the Empire, was all about handling adversity. It was like the one word that he could describe for this year was adversity, the way that the team kind of started off the year. And obviously, we already talked about it with Krim and whatnot. But how did you personally handle all of that negative criticism when, like I said, all of the people on social media are talking on like, is this guy worth it? We're not seeing the numbers that we thought with all the hype and all those things. How did you personally handle all the negative criticism at the start of the season?
Yeah, so me personally, when that stuff was happening on Twitter, or just like the Reddits, the interviews, stuff like that, like I was getting a lot of backlash just because I had one of the worst events I've ever had as a competitor. So me as a person, I literally just didn't care about those comments and stuff like that. But I regained, I bounced back, and it kind of just lit a fire in me. And from there on out, I've been dominating.
You definitely have, man. And I tell you what, there was a moment, I think it was right after LA. It was like once we kind of transferred to online, everyone's trying to get associated with the CDL and how it's now kind of changing up. And I ran into, I want to say it was Rambo actually here at the NVHQ, and he was telling me like how much that you've been putting in work. And it's almost like, and I want to ask you too, do you think that your work ethic changed more as the season went on when you're seeing those negative comments? Was it this kind of keeping up what you were doing, or did you kind of increase that work? Because at least from a few of the peers, at least from a few of the coaching staff, they were under the impression that maybe this guy's working harder now that he's receiving all this feedback. From your perspective, did that change at all during that time?
Yeah, 100%. I wanted to outgrind more because of the fact that I was performing that way. When it comes down to like performance in Halo, I never experienced something like that just because, I was on the top team with like, we were just dominating every single event. So I've never experienced anything like this. So, the hate comments and just like, being considered the worst literally just motivated me. And then from there on out, I just put so many hours, like at least 10 hours a day. So it's crazy to look back at it just because, when you put so many hours into stuff like this and to see it like successfully like come to work, I guess you could say it, like it's just crazy to see.
It definitely is, man. I know there's a lot to enjoy about this season. We talked about the MVP. We talked about the World Championship. There's a lot to like. But tell me, do you have a favorite memory from this season?
Yeah, favorite memory, I'd go with, it's outside of the game, but it was before LA. Basically, me, Kyler, Inder, we came down to, we were in a hotel room, and basically he just gave me, a lot of confidence, just saying that, we're really talented. He's the best teammates we've ever had. And then, he just gave us a motivational speech basically before the event started. And then we ended up winning that event. And then from there on out, like we've been crushing it.
Definitely, man. Well, I have to say, I will say, I'm very glad that this was highlighted recently by your teammates. But one of my favorite plays this entire season from you was we'll call it the body stack, the body shield that you have on Gunrunner and the CDL Champs Grand Final versus FaZe. Now, I was in the green room, the online green room, I'll call it that, with the rest of the talent. And whenever this play happened, we all got silent. And I think it wasn't like because no one was interested, but it was like we all knew what happened, but we didn't know how to like express in words exactly what we had seen, because very rarely do you see plays happen that don't involve like a weapon involved. And that's kind of self-explanatory, but I'll kind of explain it lightly, and I want to hear your perspective. You basically dive in front of Hook, who's going forward to fuse. You shield him just enough from Simp in order to win a huge round for the team. We're talking, this is the grand final. This is the moment. Was that moment strictly reactionary from you, or how exactly did that play kind of form out?
Yeah, so it ended up being like a 2v4 for the start of the round. So we were down numbers. They had the bomb down. So like, realistically, they should have won the round. They have the bomb down. They have control of their side of the base. So, for some reason, we all just became mute. Like no one said a word. I smoked that bomb. Kyler just said, "I'm mopping it," and then from there on out, it was just silence. And then like, in my head, I just built up like a creative thought, and like I ended up killing 2 people, and then like I meat shielded them. And then, like, that's just, like, a Halo thing. Like, you're going to take shots for your teammate. So, like, it's just, like, a Halo thing. So, it's crazy that I was able to do that in COD.
Definitely, man. Like I said, like, there aren't many plays where I look back and think, like, wow, like, the way the player, like, moved, for example, influenced. Again, not that movement isn't important, but in terms of, like, what the highlight plays always kind of turn out to be. So, I was really glad to see that, like, Clay and Krim were constantly bringing that up. Because myself, like, I was, like, very, very focused. And I was like, did you guys just see that? Like, did we just see like what we thought actually just happened on the screen? But I know obviously as a player kind of coming into the year, one major talking point, because a lot of people weren't for sure like what exactly is Shotzzy going to look like in COD. The big talking point that everybody had was the movement, right? The ability for how you kind of maneuver throughout the map. Where exactly does that come from? Is that just something that's instinctual? Is that something that you work on often? And how has that kind of been transferring over to COD now?
Yeah, I've always worked on movement ever since Halo. I would always just go into private lobby, go by myself whenever I'm bored, and just like figure out, nerdy stuff and like trying to break the game basically, and try to, learn the game better than the developer. And like it sounds cheesy, but like that stuff, like I like that stuff for some reason. Just being able to do a play and like someone say like what did he just do?
Yeah.
Like I like that reaction. So yeah, I like doing stuff like that. It's different, but it's cool that I implemented it in COD.
Is that something like, at least in terms of like a sports example that I can give, like, whenever, at least from like a basketball perspective, some players are like really, they kind of cater something specifically toward them. It's like, hey, I'm really good at dribbling, or hey, like I don't know, like there are just like certain things that like players kind of look at and kind of cater to themselves. Like, hey, I'm happy to be this kind of player. And I feel like in esports, it's a little bit different. Call of Duty, it kind of depends on the year. Is movement something that you are, not that you kind of look at yourself and phrase yourself as like a movement type player, but is that something that you take pride in most, or is there something else?
Yeah, it's a movement. It has to be 100%. Just because like, I claw, and that allows me to have, greater movement than other people. But for some reason, every game that I pick up, it's just movement. Like it's always a movement, and then it's like everything else. It's different.
Where do you think that comes from? Is it like a certain game growing up that kind of inspired that? Was it just Halo specifically?
I think it was just Halo. Like, I just went into custom games and just figured out random stuff, and then for some reason like my movement was just god tier. So I guess you could say it was just Halo, basically.
Sure, man. Now, I also want to ask you, too, in terms of the 4v4 system, I know that there are a lot of talking points around the Empire, but specifically for you, how do you feel that your style of play translates into a 4v4 system?
I think it'll translate better than it would in 5v5, to be honest, just because, like, when it comes down to communication and just small talking and stuff like that, I wasn't really able to do that just because I had 4 loud players on my team. Yep. So, I was kind of like a small talker. Like, I barely got a word out when it came down to like conversating in maps and stuff like that. So, in 4v4s, I feel like I'll be able to like, just small talk and just get my words out there better than, 5v5.
Sure. Well, I'm not sure if you saw it or not, but Gears of War Pro Mental had tweeted out basically his interest in possibly moving over to competing in COD next year if given the opportunity. He's kind of hinted at this already. I know you have some experience with Mental playing in some Search and Destroy tournaments and playing alongside of him. But do you think that your incredibly quick transfer from Halo to COD and the success rate that you had as well, because it's 2018 and Halo, the World Championship, and now it's 2020, just not that long from Halo to COD and winning the biggest thing that you can possibly win. Do you think that transfer that you have has kind of opened the door for other console players to switch to games like COD?
Yeah, I'd say so. Just because, like, you saw with Hugh, whenever he switched over to Halo, like, his talent with it was there, but like once he was able to get like a team and just train him or like teach him how to play the game, like you saw major success. Same with me. Like I had Claire and Krim to teach me the game, and you saw major success from there. So I could easily see anyone from any different game transfer over to COD and just improve, as long as they have the right people around them and just
And I've already asked you before about like what Halo player do you think could transfer over well? I think like is there any console player that you'd be really, just in general, and any console player, it could be Halo, it could be Gears, it could be really anything, but console player specifically, do you think there's anyone who would kind of stand off the page to you and be like, wow, I'd love to see how this guy would transfer to COD? Is that guy Mental? Is it someone else?
Let's just go for Halo, just because I'm a Halo
guy.
Yeah. I guess I don't want to see Roll 2, just because, in Roll 2, he's known for, like, his shot. Like, if you watch him, he literally, he's barely missing. So I think he would be interesting to see in Call of Duty, and I think he could definitely do something in COD.
Well, I'll tell you what, man. It's definitely been an interesting year, to say the least. And to kind of round things out quickly, I wanted to ask you one thing. advice, right? Players who are kind of thinking about the transfer from one console title to the next. It could be any title to Call of Duty specifically, but what advice would you give to players who are thinking about that transfer? And obviously, you've kind of set what could be a possible trend for the future. We've seen players do it before, but this quick of a success rate, at least in terms of achievements, has never been done before for obvious reasons. Any advice that you would give to players, especially console-related, who are debating on switching from something over to COD?
Yeah, my best advice would just be don't expect immediate success just because, like, you know, when you're transferring over to a game, you're not going to know anything. Like, everything's just brand new, and you need the right people around you to teach you the game. And as long as you have the talent, I genuinely think that, you know, anyone can do this. So, yeah, it just takes time.
Well, that is Shotzzy, the multiple-time and multi-time FPS World Champion, 2020 regular season MVP, and player for the Dallas Empire. Shotzzy, thanks so much for joining us today.
No problem.